Welcome to Care Less with Carly, the podcast for people who are done playing by their roles. I'm your host, Carly Lynn, and each week we'll cut through the noise with real talk, bold conversation, and expert insights to help you trade perfection for purpose and live life on your own terms. Today's guest is Yasmin Nouri, the powerhouse voice behind the Behind Her Empire podcast, where she spotlights self-made women leaders and dives deep into their journeys with money, business, self-worth, confidence, all that juicy stuff. After leaving behind a traditional career path in search of something more meaningful, Yasmin built her own empire and now empowers thousands through storytelling and community. She's also the co-founder of Beeya, a wellness brand rooted in natural hormone health, born from her own healing journey. Yasmin, thank you so much for being here. Let's start at the very beginning. You've interviewed so many women about their turning points. What was the moment you realized the traditional path just wasn't for you?
Well, thank you so much, Carly, for having me on. I'm so excited for you and your platform and the many lives you're going to be impacting. So honored to be here.
Thank you so much.
Great question. I think it took me a good amount of time, maybe 6-7 years to realize, wait, hold up. Why am I on this path? This isn't for me. But just high level, I kind of did the path that a lot of people in undergrad who study business and finance do. You either go into like consulting or banking. So I just followed the path. I was like, let me do banking, got great jobs. But every 2 years I would get an itch. I'm like, okay, I don't love this. I don't see myself here. So let me switch. So I would switch a firm. I would switch a group. I would move cities. I would be in New York. Like I tried it all. Okay. And by year 7, I remember sitting in a very specifically, I remember this moment sitting in a conference room. It was about 30 people and sitting there being like, I feel like the biggest outsider. I see the passion of everyone getting on this stage and talking and speaking. And after 6 years of jumping around, I'm like, I don't think this is for me. I've tried different groups. I've tried different cities. I've tried different firms. And that moment really felt like, no, I am a fish out of the water. This is not my place. And once I have that gut feeling, I just go. So then that started my journey of exploring what's outside of this corporate world that I'm pretty good at and only know about.
Sure. What got you into the finance world? You said it was sort of your traditional path. Was that family pressure or?
Good question. I was chasing money. I've tried to unpack that a little bit more. I think with my family, my parents are divorced. They're great friends and did a good job co-parenting, but they both really encouraged me and my sister to make your own money, be on your own feet, be financially independent. And I clearly was like, check, got it. And it's funny because you don't realize, I'm like, why am I so motivated to get that job, make that money, get that bonus, get that promotion? And I think it was what was communicated to me. And you know what? It actually was wonderful to make great money early on, right? I mean, it provided
It probably felt very validating.
Totally, 100%. And it was really nice because, we'll talk about my story fast forward, but 10 years later, I used so much of that money I saved to eventually start my business. So all wonderful lessons, but I was very much chasing validation from other people for sure, and validation from making my own money and standing on my own 2 feet.
Sure. What were those signs that came up for you when you felt that I'm a fish out of water experience? How did that feel?
It's so funny. On my podcast, women always say like, it's a gut feeling. It sounds so crazy now because I'm like, of course it's a gut feeling. Your body is screaming, this is not for me. I'm in the wrong room. But I never had that connection. I genuinely never used to listen to my body, which is a completely different path than I'm on now and how I operate in the world. But 20s and early on, no, thank you. I was not listening to myself, but it was a visceral gut feeling when I look back, and the relatability of others. I get very inspired by seeing other people, which is a huge reason the podcast has just been so fun for me to do. So I was just looking around and feeling like these aren't really my people. You just feel like you're in the right environment. And maybe if I was in a different team or a different group, which I tried for years, but it was, a visceral gut feeling that I was noticing for sure. And it got quite loud.
In what way?
It got loud because I wasn't so connected to my feelings at the time. I'm sure 4 years prior to that moment, I would have seen the signs. Okay, Yaz, you're jumping to different teams. The theme, you're not really enjoying finance as much. Like, this is not a career, but it took me so much time, so many years to finally get to that point where I'm like, this is not the path. So it just got very loud. And I think sometimes we all need those moments to actually make change, right? It's like life will continue to test you in different ways and you'll try different things until you get to a point where it's just the signs are so evident in front of you.
Did you experience burnout during that time?
Yeah, for sure. I have an interesting relationship with burnout. Absolutely. I feel like any job that I've taken, it's always been a crazy situation, crazy hours. So that was kind of the norm. It wasn't like it was 2 years of insanity. It was like, oh, this is all I know, which is a whole separate conversation because I've been trying to unwind that. But so much of it comes from, let me work harder. Let me prove myself. Let me prove my self-worth and that validation. So much of my life has been driven by those values, which, I didn't realize until I was in my 30s.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think there is something connected to being in your 20s and how you mentioned you're so much more focused on what your mind is saying and not what your body is saying. I think that it's almost that the 20s are such an important decade because you're just sort of throwing things at the wall and seeing what sticks. For most people, if you followed a conventional path, you graduated from high school and you went to college and now you're out. You had 4 years at a university studying whatever you thought was your best guess, and now you're out and you're in your first or second job in your 20s trying to figure out, is this what I want to do for the rest of my life? So I'm sure there's a lot of listeners who may be in that phase now where they're like, yeah, I'm not sure that this is what I want to do for the rest of my life. So I love how, one, you recognize that, and two, you did something about it. So can you tell us what happened once your body was saying very loudly, this isn't for you? You tried it. Good job. Let's keep going. And then how did the podcasting start for you?
Yeah. It's so interesting. When I did that big leap out of finance, I would say that was actually one of the hardest decisions. Everything else, starting a business, starting a podcast, all difficult, but that was very monumental. And anytime I do a big shift in my life, whether it's the business, whether it's starting the podcast, whether it was leaving that really cushy, incredible reputation and job that I left, I have always begun to reach out to people. That's what gives me life. That's what gives me clarity. I love connecting with people, which is just funny because of the podcast, right? Like 10 years later now. And I know you enjoy this too.
Yes.
And
community building.
Totally. So I love learning from other people. So I was doing that and I ended up leaving banking, and I didn't necessarily start my podcast or business then. It actually took me another 4 years. I was like, let me get out of finance. Let me work at a startup. Let me get into tech because maybe that's the itch I need. I don't have an idea. What am I going to do in my 20s? Like, you're still figuring things out. You don't know what your idea is. That was the best move ever that I've ever done, is working for other people in smaller environments, because that was the best stepping stone for me to really build that confidence of, oh, I see other people doing it. I'm really being a good team player, building their dreams. Now I have the confidence to do my thing. So fast forward a few years, same situation, every 2 years I'm questioning, what's my life? What am I going to do? So, it's funny. Beeya, my podcast, is the longest job I've ever had. But after working for other people, I felt that same way. I was like, dang, I've really helped others build their businesses. I'm dying to do something on my own. And, I know I've mentioned this to you. My husband has a podcast, and he's been telling me for years, I think on our first or second date, like, you ask a lot of questions. I see the way you interact. You should have a podcast. I was like, absolutely not. I am not a podcast host. But COVID hit, and it also gave me time to really reflect on just the life. The world was slower. It gave me time to reflect on, what does Yasmin want to do? What, after all these changes and all these moves I did. So that is when the podcast started, because I was figuring out, I'm ready. I have the skills, but I don't have the idea. So let me start chatting with women who've done it before. Before it was a podcast, this was just my own thing that I would do behind the scenes. Anytime I'm in a rut, let me talk to people. Let me see if I can get inspired and learn from others. And because of my husband's encouragement and because we were home in COVID, I just launched a few episodes. And no joke, I would say the third recorded episode I did, it was so loud and clear from these women that there is never a right time. There is really never a right time. My whole life, it was a series of, let me wait till I make this amount of money. Okay, when I'm 30, when I have this experience. And I just felt like I kept pushing it down the line. And I was like, this could not be louder. Again, that voice took years, got very loud. So that's when I really felt encouraged to put the podcast out there, because I was like, if I listened to these episodes 7 years ago, who knows where my path would have gone, because it made such an impact to me.
Yeah, a couple of things that you mentioned that I love. First of all, every time you talk about the voice, I can't help but picture almost like you're in a movie and the announcer voice comes in and like, Yasmin, it's time. It's time to make a change. That's how I see it for you. And I love how you thought, okay, I don't have the idea, which I always feel like is this pressurized task to come up with the idea. But instead you just thought, okay, well, what's something I'm already doing that I'm enjoying? What's something that's coming to me naturally? It sounds like you were already reaching out to people, ask interesting questions, learn what their path was like, because you were soul seeking for your own journey. And then you created this whole empire based on something that was so true and organic for you. So if you're a listener and you're already doing something that is like breathing for you, maybe that is your big idea. Maybe it's just that. If you love researching the latest health trends or trying out new workout classes or checking out museum exhibits, maybe that is your idea. I also loved what you said about if you had heard these conversations 7 years before you were there, it really could have helped you. And a lot of what's inspiring me with this care less concept is really just that. It's what is the support community? What are the self-limiting beliefs that I wish I could move beyond, that I wish I had a decade ago when I wanted to start this? So I so appreciate that you took action into making this real. And now, how long has the podcast been going?
Gosh, we're 5 years in August, which is crazy. And also it's funny because I love what you said because it's so true. I think also sometimes people have pressure of, I don't have this idea. I love, for let's say podcasting or meeting people. Someone's like, oh, I really resonate with both of Carly and Yasmin's story. I love connecting and talking to people. Sometimes there's pressure about, well, how do I make money? And I think following hobbies and doing it on the side when you still have that job, it could also be helpful, because sometimes we put pressure of like, how am I going to figure that out? And sometimes, maybe podcasting isn't the income source you might need to live the lifestyle you want, but it gives you that creativity, that inspiration to unlock something else in your life that could be the bigger idea that can financially support you. So I just share that because sometimes you can put so much pressure on yourself when maybe it's more of a fun, creative project that will unlock something else.
Yeah, exactly. And I think a lot of the community building that I hope resonates with listeners is that I want this to be a space for people who are trying, the people who are just getting going, because there is so much strength in having somebody to text and saying, this is what I'm doing. I'm so confused, or I'm scared, or I see you're a couple of steps ahead. How did you get there? It's so empowering. Were there people in your world, it sounds like your husband, but outside of your husband, that were those support pillars for you?
Yeah, I would say early on, it was really my husband, because he was the first person to be around me 24/7 and reflect back on certain things, which I thought was really interesting. But as the podcast has grown, as I've had a business, I've also had to foster those relationships, people who have done it before, who understand entrepreneurship, who, you mentioned even trying. It's so interesting because being early on and trying is such a vulnerable moment. And I've interviewed so many women now and become friends with many who have significantly bigger businesses. And it's a different scale, but they are still putting themselves in very uncomfortable situations. So even before I started Beeya, I remember being so nervous. It's very nerve-wracking. I think I told you this before, Carly, when we met. Like, you feel naked when you create something and you put it out
Yeah.
into the world. You're like, everyone's going to judge me. So I totally remember those feelings of insecurity. Are people going to like it? Are people going to judge me? Are people in my old job going to be like, what is Yasmin doing? That was a very loud voice early on. But I remember thinking to myself, if I don't start Beeya, or I don't put this podcast out there, all the women that I aspire to be, I will never get to that point because I'm just holding myself back. So whether it works out or not, this is part of the journey to be that person that I see myself as an entrepreneur. I see myself being a woman of impact and helping others, but this is part of the process.
Yeah.
And I also say that because I see the behind the scenes of so many amazing friends of mine who have built massive companies and they deal with the same stuff. And you think we're all kind of the same and we're dealing with our own battles. They might look a little differently, but they still show up. I think that's the biggest thing. And they put themselves out there. And there's nothing like starting a business or podcast where you are put in situations, especially in business, where you can't even predict it to happen. Like something happened this morning where it's just like, this is funny. And I texted my friends and I just, like you said, that community is so big. I'm like, I'm sure you guys have dealt with this before. I woke up, this is a situation. I was like, business is incredible. No matter what size, no matter what scale, you will always be surprised about something. So that courage, that putting yourself out there and getting things across the finish line is such a great skill for whatever you continue to build in the world that you want to.
Yes. And it's a good reminder that the growing really never stops. It changes. It looks different. Maybe the problems are different, but it's an evolution. And I loved how you said that you were afraid of what old coworkers might say.
Oh, yeah.
That you thought, I want to be the person who's creating impact and using her voice. And what the word that was coming up for me was, you want to be the woman that's brave.
Yeah.
You want to be the woman that's unafraid. And I think that in of itself is such visible growth, because the person who's afraid of what their colleagues might say or judgment is not the woman who's putting out a podcast and running a business and building an empire. So that was an immediate level up the second you decided to put it out. And now, being honest, how did it feel once it was out? Did you feel judged by coworkers, or was that just a belief that you were holding on to?
Such a good question. It was really tough and uncomfortable. And I remember specifically, being in the world of finance and corporate, like LinkedIn is like your Instagram, right? Like people follow you. I remember
Sure.
old clients, like that is like the jam. And I remember being so nervous about sharing the podcast, like to my community there. Like, so I just very much visibly remember that. And now I don't even blink once about it. But no one said anything. And I think one thing that I learned in this process, and I think the beautiful thing about starting small and starting a small podcast and organically growing and starting a business and organically growing, it's like, you think the world is paying attention? No one cares about you. You think that old coworker who you're like, I'm cringing that they're seeing this, they aren't even batting an eye. So I think the biggest learning is like, you think everyone is looking at you. I don't know why. That's how I felt, at least very early on, even in the business. Like, oh, what are people going to think about this? I've realized now, being like 5-6 years in, no one is caring. No one is looking. And then you'll see people in your circle encourage you and support you. And you really build that confidence where, a year goes in, 2 years goes in, you're just so much more confident in that sense.
When you were talking about not caring about what other people think, I mean, so much about the podcast naming of Care Less was because I was doing a journaling practice one morning, and I was thinking about actually my grandparents. My grandfather had recently passed, and I was thinking about how blessed we are to live with so much comfort and how different it was from our grandparents' generation. And I thought to myself, okay, I have this dream and I really want to do it. How lucky am I to live in a time where the only thing standing between me and doing this is my own fear? And I thought about my grandparents. I thought, okay, if they were sitting across from me, what would they say? And I could just hear it like clear as day, as if they were just, going through what they were going to have for lunch. Yep. Just care less. Just do it.
Wow.
And it's amazing how just that little shift of what we give our attention and our focus to can be the make or break between living in alignment with the dream that we have, singing our song out there and living in a place of fear. And I don't think that we're necessarily taught that when we grow up, to listen to that voice unless it gets so loud and then you have to. But I just so appreciate how now you don't bat an eye. You just post.
A little bit. I will say.
You bat like a little eye?
I bat an eye. Like, I'm sure if my team would be like, yes, you still care. It's something I still work on. It's a constant battle. It's a constant thing. I've come a long way, but it still can show up. So I just share that because in case anyone's like, my thoughts are still there. The thoughts are definitely still there. I just choose not to sit in it for as long. That's the biggest growth that I've had for sure.
Do you think it's a muscle? Do you think you get better at it over time?
No question. That's why I just want to encourage people to start and put it out there. It is a total muscle. It gets so much easier, and there's nothing better than practice, like 100%.
Do you think honing this muscle has changed other aspects of your life also?
100%.
You think you show up more fearlessly in other areas too?
It's a really good question because so much of my life is like the podcast and the business. I mean, the business and then really the podcast is like the second tier. I think so. I think I've become a lot more comfortable in myself. And the way that shows up outside of work and podcasting is boundaries and certain things that I don't want to deal with anymore. I had no boundaries in my 20s. There's so many stories that I could share. I've come a long way, and it was super difficult in the beginning. But yes, I've really, and I really hope to continue this journey because I'm still on it. I want to just continue being who I am, owning my voice, and just being authentic in everything that I do because for so long I wasn't. So to be in this place where I get to now is just so powerful. So I'm still growing into myself, but I've come a very long way.
And just to go one deeper into that, you've interviewed some of the world's most accomplished women. Are there any themes or traits that you see come up a lot in those women that you've interviewed?
Yeah, for sure. A few that stood out, especially early on. Now I've just had so many stories, so I'm like at a different level of things that I notice. But in the early days, and I mentioned this earlier, was they just go for it. It's like, yes, like there's never a right time. And I think you need to be thoughtful about how you approach things. It's not like they're risk averse. No, they're thoughtful about it, but they take that leap. They go for it. They put the podcast out. They start the business, even if it's 5 people that they're beginning to talk to about it. They take the first step. And I think the people that I really respect, and I have so much more of a deeper appreciation now because I've been a little bit still early in my career, but 5 years in of building a business, is there is so much hardship that goes on behind the scenes of, even podcasting, like you were saying, that mental voice. And in business, it's like the mental stamina you need to have to still show up for your team, still show up every day with enthusiasm when really the behind the scenes is not glamorous. But when you zoom out, it's well worth doing everything you're doing. Even with podcasting, the day-to-day sometimes is very difficult. So I really admire women who have been in the game for over a decade, who are still in there, who've gone through so much hardship that it really, again, every time I go through something, I'm like, this is what people go through. This is business. And then I just kind of pull stories of other women who've gone through way more difficult things, who persevered and went through it. So I just have so much respect for anyone, even outside of the women on my podcast, who do hard things.
Right. Was there one interview or something you learned in any of your podcasts that stuck with you or guides you in some way?
One thing that did come up, and it's come up quite a bit, it was actually a guest on my podcast, but offline in an event, so different situation. And this really stood out to me. She pulled me aside and we were just catching up. And this was like, I think it was 1 year into my business, 1.5 years, so like very early days. And she's like, you are living the best part of your journey. And I was like, what do you mean? Because I was checking in with her. How are you doing? She just got investors. I think she sold a good amount. Like she was in every retail store, like incredible, and an amazing woman too, which I just respect so much. And she said, you are in the best part of your life right now. You're building, make sure you enjoy the journey because as you do get bigger, things are different. You know, your decisions are on a different scale and more people are involved in the business. And it's just when you're an entrepreneur, you love the early days. You hear that a lot. A lot of people say like, I don't know if I want to be the CEO of like a significantly bigger business because I love the buildings. Because in the early days, it's so hard where you're like, I admire you. Good for you. Like, tell me all the secrets. How did you get there? And she just reflected that back on me. And also through the interviews, just realizing that and even also my own journey, there's no destination. She said, it sounds so corny and cheesy, but it genuinely is true. It's you need to enjoy the journey because every milestone you hit, it actually is a moving target. So it's really the journey. So I think I've been hearing that quite a bit and I'm trying to work on that aspect, I would say, more so in my day-to-day.
Such a good reminder. It's almost like this sweet spot of when you're just starting or you're small, you're so nimble, you can pivot, you can change course at any minute, right? You're small. When you get bigger, those problems are bigger. Your audience is bigger. Your customer size is bigger. You can't just decide one morning you want to go in a completely different direction. That's such a good reminder. And I also do want to ask you about starting Beeya and how that feels similar or different to running the Behind Her Empire podcast, because I feel like that's almost a completely separate part of the brain. I know it was born out of your own healing journey. So obviously you followed that voice. This was something that was resonant, but how do you balance the two?
Yeah, for sure. So I've always noticed I get really hyped up when anything about women. I'm like, why are there not women in this meeting? Where are the women? I went from finance, I went to tech, I went to different industries. I'm like, I don't understand. So the podcast was an extension of that. And when my business idea with Beeya came about, it's also in the space of women. The business started from a problem that I had, horrible hormones, horrible periods, horrible PMS. I found a solution through an integrative and functional medicine doctor, and serendipity in life really helped me. And I think when you're on the path of like your authentic self and what you truly care about, it takes hard work, but life will show you signs and green flags to keep on doing it, which is how the business started a lot faster than I was expecting, how my co-founder and sister-in-law got involved, how we found a medical advisor. So yeah, Beeya started a year after the podcast. And looking back on those early days, I'm like, man, it was so fun going from 0 to 1 when you have an idea, when you're just figuring out the product, when you're figuring out the marketing and like the landing page. It's like so fun because kind of like in school and in my corporate world, you kind of know the next path. And I'm really good about you tell me to go there, I will go there and farther. So when you start a podcast in the early days or a business, there's a really fun excitement about getting things done on your to-do list. The fun, crazy part happens is once you're live, right? How do you deal with customers? How do you get it out there? How do you market? How do you deal with a 3PL? How do you deal with tariff situations? How do you deal with vendors? So it's been a really awesome learning experience. And the person that I am, if we had this conversation last year, I would be all over the place. It was very difficult. It was the most amazing time because the business was growing and I didn't have a full-fledged team yet, probably a year and a half ago. And I was still doing the podcast. So there was no moment in time where I had fun, like outside hobbies. I really sacrificed quite a bit.
Right.
But it was something that I was so passionate about. And I think sometimes to get things off the ground, you need that tunnel vision focus.
Yes.
At least that's from my own experience. And, you know, now I can breathe a little bit with a team, with structure, but it takes a lot of blood, sweat, and tears of you to do it. And I didn't want to stop the podcast. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I would literally be like, this is so difficult. I'm running Beeya and I have a podcast and, you know, I need to still do prep and show up. And, you know, it's a different, got to put makeup on, got to do my hair. And I remember my husband once was like, well, why don't you just stop? I don't understand. No one's telling
one's
you got to
pressuring
do
you.
it. Yeah. And I'm like, I got this, again, that gut visceral feeling. I was like, absolutely not. This is my baby. I'm not going to let it go. So, yeah, it's been a journey for sure. But it's really fun to reflect back that my world is kind of in supporting women, which is so awesome. And my younger self would just be so proud. So I think that's amazing.
Wow, there's so much good there. I love that you shared. And even how you just ended, like, what would the younger version of you think about how far you've come? When you were talking about balancing Beeya with the podcast and considering stopping the podcast, I know when we started talking, you mentioned a relationship with burnout. And it sounds like
Yeah.
that was probably a time where you just had so much on your plate and you didn't have the team support, it sounds like, that you have now. So I can only imagine how much you really needed to prioritize weaving in whatever snippets of self-care that you could into that time. And maybe now you have a little bit more space for it.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because also when I was in that moment, I'm like, how am I going to run a wellness company, but behind the scenes, not honor certain things and how I'm feeling? I'm generally a healthy person, but to push to that extent is not healthy. And I think starting a business has allowed me to, like I was saying earlier on, create those boundaries and understand, oh, I actually can't show up and problem solve when I don't sleep, when I don't eat. So if anything, the business has got me to be like a wellness 2.0 version of myself of like, I need 3 meals a day with protein, fat, and fiber. I have to stay hydrated. I need movement. I need sleep. No joke. My friends know I don't mess around during the week. It's like, I need my wellness practices to show up to be the best version of myself. It's the only way I can be happy, excited, and passionate about what I'm doing. Because I've had moments where I'm not, where I've had to reset. So it's been a really awesome learning experience. It's kind of like you're an athlete.
Right. Right. You're like a peak performance athlete and you
Sure.
don't have the margins to mess around. And I separately want to do like a whole nother conversation about what your sleep routine is, because that's something that I struggle with, that a lot of my girlfriends struggle with. I think sleep is so key, but I hear exactly what you're saying. Now operating at this really high level, you don't have the flexibility to be able to ignore eating proper meals and getting proper nutrients. That makes a ton of sense. I'm wondering if there's somebody listening who is stuck now between the steady career and the creative calling, if there's any advice that you could share with that listener.
I would say to not let go or forget of that creative calling and to do whatever little step it is. Every day, do one little thing. Do not forget, because that will bring you so much joy in your life. And for me, I'm always optimizing. Like, I respect people who are joyful, who have great family lives, who are happy. Like, it's just, we live once. You want to be the best version of yourself and what fulfills you. So I would say, do not forget about that creative calling and to just really honor it and nurture it. And you never know where it will take you. That is like the really fun thing about life.
Right. Right. I feel very inspired by that. And then before we close, is there anything that you are building or dreaming about on a personal or professional level that we, the audience, can support you in?
My gosh, I love it. Dreaming. You know, I mean, just the podcast is such a passion. The business that I'm doing to help women. You even said with sleep, I'm like, we'll talk offline. I got some tips and things for you.
Please.
But yeah, just, I think the biggest thing that would make me so happy and excited is seeing other people taking that leap and more women having the confidence to battle that inner voice that we all have. Like, I think that is just the biggest gift, is when I see women in their power who have pushed through those limiting beliefs. Like, because I know there's so much joy and excitement and a life that you don't even know exists until you make those moves. So that would be the biggest gift for me to get, is to hear people's experiences of being on that journey.
Yes. And also carving the path for the women that will come after them. In so many ways, everything you've done and everything you've built has been so inspiring for me. And I'm so grateful to be having this conversation with you and to keep spreading your mission with my audience. So thank you so much.
Yes, Yes. Thank you, Carly. You're amazing. Such great questions. You're going to change so many people's lives. I'm so excited.
I really appreciate you taking the time. I'll link all of your channels and Beeya and Behind Her Empire in the show notes. And I hope we can do this again very soon.
Yes, anytime.
Thanks for tuning in to Care Less with Carly. If this episode resonated with you or reminded you to stop living by someone else's rules, I would love to hear about it. Don't forget to hit subscribe so you never miss an episode. And if you enjoyed today's conversation, leaving a quick review means the world and helps more people find the show. If there's a guest you'd love to hear from, DM me their name at Careless with Carly on Instagram or drop me a comment. I'm always looking for powerful, honest voices to bring into this space. Until next time, you got this. Keep caring less about what others think and more about what makes you come alive.